Hello and welcome back to another SwansCast match preview ahead of our second league game of the season, and that's going to be against West Bromwich Albion, staying with a Midlands sort of vibe, having played Birmingham at home in the first game week. And I'm joined this time by Brad from Albion Insights. Thank you for joining me, Brad.
Thank you for having me, Luke.
If you'd like to maybe introduce yourself and what you do and what sort of content you make, that'd be great so everyone can check you out then.
Yes, my name's Brad. Obviously, I run Albion Insights for West Bromwich Albion. I started the page exactly a day yesterday, a year ago. So the type of content that I post is sort of all rolls around West Bromwich Albion, incomings, outgoings, anything to go on with the club itself. I had a bit of a rebrand ahead of this current season. So before this, I was football analyst. I decided to make it more Albion focused, as that is sort of my niche and the things that I enjoy talking about on Twitter. So
yeah, so I'd imagine it's you're a fan of West Brom, isn't it? It's always easier to talk about football
exactly,
when relating it back to yourself and who you support. So no, fair play, well done, and I hope it keeps growing and going well for you. And hopefully you can give us a bit of insight into West Brom today. So as I spoke to you beforehand, we're going to do a bit of a preview video, and the main goal here is for all the Swansea fans watching to discover a little bit about our opposition going into the next match on Saturday. So we're recording this on the 10th, which is Thursday. Hopefully the video should be out this evening, so you might be watching it either today or Friday or before kick-off on Saturday. So let's get straight into it then. Aside from transfers then, just in the club itself, has there been any significant changes at West Brom over the summer?
So probably the most significant change would be Ron Golai leaving the club. He was the CEO, chief executive of the club, and his tenure was probably less than successful, I'd probably say. He come into the club and he said that he wanted to be always transparent with the fans. He wanted to return the club to its former glory. And really, when he looked back at it, he failed to do so. He was also quite often he would go to his friends rather than actually looking into good recruitment, good staff, good recruitment. He would often go to, so for example, he stuck by Steve Bruce quite a lot, probably more than he should have done in last season. So Steve Bruce had quite a bad run of games, and fans were calling for him to leave the club, and he essentially gave him longer than he should have had. He left, and Mark Miles now took over. So Mark Miles has worked for the club for 20 years. He knows the background, he knows the staff. Some fans seen it as an underwhelming appointment. And I do get that point of view, but he's probably the only person left at the top end of the club who understands the values, understands the staff, and has that relationship.
Yeah.
The rest of the board, the rest of the execs, really just don't have a clue about West Bromwich Albion or football in general. Apart from that, there's been no other real notable outgoings in terms of staff or management from the
Fair enough. That's interesting. I know you mentioned the Steve Bruce period. I would have said from an outside perspective, I'm surprised it took so long maybe to pull the trigger on his tenure. I thought he definitely underperformed with the squad that you had. I went up to the West Brom away game last year, and obviously for us, that was a good result. I think if I'm right, we went 1-0 up and then we were down 2-1 before coming back. So maybe game management, like Russell Martin wasn't necessarily renowned for his in-game management being one of his better traits, and to go away and kind of get that sort of result against yourselves, who we, I think, at the start of the season thought would be up the top end. I know you had a bad start, but it was definitely a good result for us. I think maybe too late because it probably maybe cost you an opportunity to progress towards the end of the season then.
Yeah, I mean, well, after the first 18 non-team games, I believe we were 24th in the table, sitting rock bottom, and only Middlesbrough were above us as well. And around the same time, Carlos Corberán took over from Steve Bruce, so did Michael Carrick. and both teams sort of catapulted up the league at that point. So you think that
the underperformance.
If Steve Bruce did leave, maybe before, I think it was before Luton, maybe that's when people start to get more frustrated with him. That we did have a chance of getting playoffs. So,
yeah, like I said, it says it all that you came back and got so close. Same as Middlesbrough, actually. They did the same thing, didn't they? And then you had the opposite with teams like QPR, who looked like they were early season playoff contenders before. Just
also Coventry as well were down there with us at the same time. So for all three clubs to have such a massive turnaround was quite impressive.
Coventry was a bit of a weird one, wasn't it? Because they missed a lot of games at the start of the season being postponed or cancelled with their stadium issues. And I think it was always, for them, they didn't have the points on the table. They looked so far adrift, even though they hadn't played the games. Had a bit of a poor start, but they done well, I think, to come back in that sort of, well, their schedule would have been tighter as well. I think people don't consider the fact that they would have had to make all these games up. So fair play to them. Okay, in terms of changes, still on the same theme, any notable transfers in and out of West Brom? I know somebody that we were linked with in January has left to go to Cardiff City instead, our big rivals. Grant, isn't it? So any other big transfers in and out of West Brom?
So we've actually lost 7 senior players from the squad this season over the summer. So that would be Darragh O'Shea, Jack Livermore, David Button recently as well, Tom Rogic, Colin Grant, as you said, Keane Bryan and Zach Ashworth's gone along to Bolton as well. So, I mean, when you look at that, we were losing a third of the squad from sort of last season, apart from maybe Keane Bryan, who has played very little part over the past 2 seasons. When you look at incomings from there, we've only brought in 2 players to replace the 6-7 players that we've lost. And you just sort of look at our squad now, and it's so weak compared to even last season under Bruce, as you said previously. It's just such a weak squad. I think losing Darragh O'Shea is probably the biggest problem. I don't think a lot of Albion fans realise how solid he was at the back and how much we will miss him this season. He was an academy graduate and he's come through, and yes, he did have a mistake in him, but for the most part, he was our best ball-playing centre-back. Carlos trusted him. He was our captain as well. And to lose him to someone like Burnley in the Premier League is obviously a massive, massive hit.
Yeah.
But when you look at Livermore, Button, Bryan, that maybe it was the time for them to move on. Certainly, in my perspective, it's time for them to move on. Colin Grant's sort of an interesting one because I always thought he was misprofiled by the club, bringing him in for the price tag that they did. I always knew that he was sort of a player that played best off the left, off of a taller type of striker, proper centre forward, and we like to play him as a lone striker for the most part, and it just didn't work. His best seasons come at Huddersfield, playing with someone like Steve Mounier, also at Charlton with Lyle Taylor, I believe, as well. He got 15 goals and assists.
Yeah.
So I think Cardiff's probably the best move for him if they can get someone like Kiefer Moore in. I know they've been linked with that, off a big centre forward. Then I think it would be a very good signing for Cardiff. I know you
want to be hearing.
You probably don't want to be hearing that, but yeah. I think in terms of departures, it probably was right. The 6 of them, Livermore, Button, Rogic, it was time for them to move on. Darragh was probably the worst one. Then incomings, we've got Jeremy Sarmiento coming in from Brighton on loan. Josh Madger from Bordeaux on a free. He managed to get 22 goals and assists in, I think it was 32 games last season for Bordeaux in League 2. I know that he sort of had a bit of a name for himself in English football with Sunderland, and then also loans to Stoke and Fulham, where he didn't really carry on the prolific spell he did at Sunderland. So to bring the both in is very positive, but I just don't think we're filling those gaps that we need to at the moment, like centre back and full back in the striker spot.
Maybe a little bit more work to be done then before the end of the transfer window, hopefully.
Definitely, hopefully.
Okay, so with the team you've got then and start of the season, what sort of style of play can we expect to see on Saturday from your team?
So Carlos does prefer sort of a high press. He does prefer a high press, playing it from the back. He's quite a modern manager for him being so young as well. The problem is at the moment, our squad seems to lack a lot of desirability. It's lacking a lot of willingness and a lot of sharpness, I would say.
Yeah.
Especially the opening game against Blackburn Rovers and Stoke as well on Tuesday night. There wasn't a lot of energy at all in our starting lineup. Players just seem disinterested. I'm not too sure if that's coming down from something that's happening behind the scenes, because you'd think that after a full pre-season of people having rest and coming through recovery, that this is the time of season where people would be full of energy and going at games. And I just don't really see that, apart from maybe Jason Malumbi and Brandon Thomas-Asante. There's not really a lot of energy elsewhere. The problem is with our current crop of centre halves is we do like to play it from the back, as I said. And Colbrand did start with Cedric Kipper and Semi Ajayi at centre half against Blackburn Rovers. And I think for the majority of fans, it was a very strange decision from Carlos, because we did ship 12 goals in 6 games, I believe, in pre-season against teams like Cheltenham and Burton Albion. And we just don't have the confidence at the back anymore since Dario O'Shea left. We don't have the players with the right calibre of players or the right suitability of players to be playing it from the back, in my opinion. I think Connor Townsend and Darnell Furlong have had the time, in my opinion. They haven't had competition for 2, 3, 4 seasons, and it's starting to show. They're becoming very complacent, and I think that showed against Rovers, where Townsend sort of lost the ball, didn't try to get back, left a massive hole, and we conceded 2 goals in 60 seconds. So I think it's just a massive complacency thing at the moment.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't help where Colbrand sort of picking a bewildering sort of starting 11 as well, especially against Blackburn Rovers, with starting Nathaniel Chalobah and OK Kuslu in like a double pivot. It was very confusing for most Albion fans, including myself, because when you look at the pre-season minutes of central midfielders and defensive midfielders played for West Brom, Chalobah only played 61 minutes compared to someone like John Swift, Alex Mowat and Tyler Gardner-Hickman, who all played over 200 minutes.
Yeah.
So it was just very, very strange decision from Carlos to do that.
So maybe he still doesn't know his preferred first team, potentially. That's
the most worrying part. If you going into the start of the season not knowing at least your favourite starting 11 is very worrying, in my opinion.
Yeah, and obviously you can always adjust it based on performances and who's playing well and all the rest of it. But you need to have at least a baseline from day one, I think. Exactly. Which I would say on our behalf, like Duff coming in, he didn't make many changes from the cup game, and that says to me that he does know where he wants to put his faith in certain positions. And he did make like 3 or 4, I think, changes, but not. And they were all strong changes to other players you'd expect to be in and around the first team, which says he pretty much knows his starting team right now, and he wants to get the other players in and amongst minutes for competition purposes. Which, it's been a breath of fresh air to see that, because you more often than not these days see so many like wholesale changes for cup matches.
That's the thing as well. I think
we just benefit from it. That's all with the results. So yeah.
I mean, with Carlos, I mean, he made wholesale changes, like you said. He completely changed the formation from a 4-2 sort of 4-2-3-1 to a 5 at the back to a 5-3-2, and it's like, if you don't know your favourite formation or your favourite starting 11 even for cup games, it's very, very worrying, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of managers like to fluctuate with their tactics and style, but it's one of them things that you think get something right first.
Yeah, surely it should be done in pre-season and not during the first couple of games of a new season.
Yeah, I agree. And like, you think there's always like a base point that this is the preferred way, and then maybe if you need to change, if it's not working after a few games, or
have a little tweak,
it's not working in a game, and you can change it like in the second half or whatever needs to be done. I understand that, but I always get a little bit worried when you're looking at starting lineups week in, week out, and it's a completely different system. I think I don't know, like from past experience when we've had managers that have done that sort of thing, you always feel like it's at a time where they're like, oh, they're trying this now because it's not been going well.
Yeah.
But yeah, if his second game of the season, look, maybe he's on to something, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm saying all this now, and he might get like a 5-0 win over us. So
it's very interesting to think, like, if he's gone with a 4 at the back against Blackburn and gone with a 3 at the back against Stoke, is he going to go with the 4 at the back or 3 at the back against Swansea? Is he going to, because the problem is with shipping goals so easily, he may be looking at a back 3, back 5 to try and shore up that defence. But
yeah,
we didn't look any more conservative with the back 5, which is even more worrying.
but it depends what sort of like back 5 you play in, doesn't it? Because often these days back 5s mean wing backs bomb forward to join the attack, and then if they haven't got the desire you were talking about earlier to get back, it could make you weaker. So
yeah, I mean, most of our offensive threat really comes from Jed Wallace. And when you do play that back 5, you sort of lose that threat because Furlong has to sort of be shoehorned into that role. I can't see him personally going with the back 3/back 5 against Swansea. I do think he will revert to the original formation against Blackburn, which was the 4-3-3. It'll just be a personnel change.
Speaking of personnel, you just mentioned Jed Wallace. I'm going to skip over the question of preferred or predicted formation and lineup because I think you touched on a lot of that in the last discussion. So if we continue the personnel and say what key players have you got that might feature that Swansea should be looking out for?
No one. I think when you look at our starting 11, there's not a lot of quality at the moment at all. I did post a thread today as well, obviously that you tagged in yourself, where I'd done a combined 11 of Swansea and West Brom, and a lot of the Swansea squad getting over West Brom. I'd say 90% of the time, but we don't have a lot of quality at the back. We don't have a lot of quality up front. A lot of players are misprofiled, like Brandon Thomas-Asante.
Yeah,
he's more of a winger than a striker, I would say. So in terms of danger men, I'd say Kuslu is probably our best player at the moment, but even he's starting the season a little bit weaker than he normally would. So I think the players to look out for really is Wallace, as you said. He does have a good cross. He does like to get forward and beat his man. But the problem is he doesn't get his head up for crosses. He doesn't look where he wants to play the ball. He just sort of whips it into Thomas-Asante, who's 5'9", 5'10", and just isn't a number 9. So I don't think you've got too much to worry about, if I'm honest. I think maybe if Jeremy Sarmiento has a starting role or has a cameo, then that's someone to look out for, because when he came in against Rovers, he was very direct, very pacey. He liked to attack players. So if you're playing someone like your back 5 of Cabango, Wood and Darling, who's quite young, they may struggle to have someone who's so direct running them, because you don't really see that sort of quality in the Championship.
Yeah, pace definitely can be our undoing a little bit, I think, or in previous seasons, especially under Russell Martin. Obviously, it's hard for me to discuss where our strengths and weaknesses lie at the moment because it's in a bit of a transition. We still maybe falling into some of the same traps that the squad have been doing in the last few years, because I guess they're still in them habits and Duff hasn't fully got them out of it. So pace could definitely still be a thing that hurts us. It's more when we lose the ball, maybe high up the pitch, because we like to try and keep it in a certain way. And then we're in a position where you've got someone on the break and it's in that transition of us in the ball control formation. You've done a stray pass, so there's not that many players in defensive positions to then cover. And it's that transition of trying to get back there that the opportunity is present. So it's if you're able to sort of quickly convert that space into an opportunity before our players can get back into shape. And that's quite, I think, that's been our biggest weakness consistently for the last 2 years, and where between goals conceded in that fashion and goals conceded with a high press where you've maybe put pressure on the goalkeeper, which has resulted in a stray pass directly from him to a dangerous area. Those are the 2 areas that we've definitely conceded most from. And it sounds easy to say, but if you stamp those types of mistakes out, we would have, I think, shot up in terms of our defensive record, which would have changed, our result at the end of the season. But
yeah,
Russell Martin couldn't quite cut it out, and we'll see if Duff can. I'm expecting it to be a little bit better with his style. I feel like there's a little bit less messing around at the back and a little bit more assuredness with the defense. But like I said, it's trying to teach the players out of these mistakes. So
that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the only with that sort of player style, I mean, Wallace, Brandon Thompson-Sante, and Matt Phillips, on the day that they are a very good pressing front three, and they do put players under pressure, and we're seeing that at Blackburn Rovers. So if that is the case, where Duff sort of hasn't drawn it out of the players yet, then that is a potential for for a chance.
And also we've signed a new goalkeeper on loan from Brighton. Mine's gone blank on his name.
Rushworth.
I know it is. I just So because there's been so many new players coming in. Sorry, Rushworth is correct. You're lucky. You coming onto the Swans channel telling me the goalkeeper we signed. I was going to say Ashby because we were at the game the other day and one of the boys called him Ashworth because we signed Ashby and Rushworth and he just mixed them up. So I was just going to say that. I was like, oh, that's not right. Yeah, Carl Rushworth. Sorry, he's been in goals for the last 2 games. He made the error that cost us the goal against Birmingham. As much as they played well, it was quite a fair draw, I think.
Yeah.
Their goal came from him passing it out and it being a bad pass, went straight to them, kind of just outside the box. And the finish was outstanding, to be fair, from the Birmingham player. But ultimately, if you put that through, you put through that ball, that opportunity never happened. So maybe changes the result. And then also against Northampton in the week, he didn't make a mistake that cost us anything, but he did try a low pass along the box, to one of the defenders. I think the left back passes to him. He's trying to pass it up to the right back. And he made a mess of the pass that got intercepted and someone was through on goal. We ultimately dealt with it just about. But that's 2 errors in 2. The reason he's been brought in was because our previous keeper, Fisher, was making those sort of errors all the time. And they're still there. So, and that's a keeper that didn't play under Russell Martin. So it'll be interesting to see how we can phase that out of him. But opportunities, definitely, if you get the press right, is the point, I guess, that I'm trying to get at there. And yes, that you said about that thread, I will retweet that when we finished with this as well. So it'll probably be on Twitter somewhere for you to see before you see this video. So if you haven't already seen it, just head over to Twitter and check it out. There's a lot more stuff on there than just the content that we added. There's content from other Swansea fans about the game and also a lot about West Brom, of course, and how they're going to approach the game and little insights from different creators. From what I gather, that's kind of quite a lot of work. So fair play. That's good effort there. Okay, come to the end then. But in terms of Swansea players, then, as a West Brom fan, looking at this game, who worries you coming on the pitch? Who can maybe do damage to you guys?
I think it's sort of easy to look at the front two of potential front two of Yates and Perot, because it can really hurt our defence. The way having both of them up top will really hurt our defence, especially if they're going man to man against someone like Carl Bartley or Semi Ajayi. It will really hurt us.
Yeah,
I think the main player we'd have to look out for is Matt Grimes. The way that we set up against Blackburn, we were very susceptible to over-the-top balls behind our defence. And from watching the highlights against Blues, the over-the-top ball that Grimes played into Cullen, I believe it was, to set up the chance for Yates, it was very devastating. And I can just see that happening over and over and over again against us if we set up the same way as we did against Blackburn. That's one thing I'm probably more worried about that than I'm against Perot and Yates, if I'm honest.
So on that note, I would imagine Yates and Perot will start and Cullen potentially will come on, same as what happened with Birmingham
Blues. So I mean, as well, Cullen, when he came on, he was I think it was coming for Patterson. I think it was.
Yeah,
and he just looks a lot more energetic, a lot more lively, and if Carlos sort of persists with this immobile middle two of Yukusto and Chalobah, which I don't think he will, but if he did, your midfield and your attack just will completely overrun our midfield, the same as Blackburn Rovers did.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I think apart from that as well, probably your wing backs in
Yeah.
Ashby and Josh Key. There were two players that I actually looked at as well as in a thread for West Brom who they should be looking at to sign, who they should be looking at to recruit. Two players that I do really like. I think Josh Key's playing out of position at the moment at left wing back, but I think that the width they provide and the youthfulness of athleticism against players like Townsend and Furlong, that it would be a very long afternoon for Townsend and Furlong, in my opinion.
Yeah, Josh Key specifically has impressed since he's joined. I think he's quite an exciting young talent that we've been quite happy seeing what he's put out on the pitch at the moment. Ashby came with a lot more reputation than Key. For me, he's been a bit of a slow starter though, but maybe that's just the perception of the reputation. There was a massive deal made of the fact that we got him from Newcastle, and they were singing his praises. And obviously, Key's been shifted out of position to accommodate him straight away, which is fine. And he hasn't done a bad job, but I think because of that fanfare, like you just think, maybe you expect him more, which is probably an unfair way of looking at it. But I think it's just natural sometimes with what you read,
especially when it's coming from like a Premier League club. You expect like Premier League quality, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah,
so.
And the opposite where Key has come up
from a league one,
and he looks a little bit more exciting at the moment. So, but it'd be interesting to see how both this seasons develop, especially if we address the left back role correctly. You know, they're both going to be fighting in essentially for one position then. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. As for, you mentioned the over-the-top ball, and Grimes' ball to Cullen was superb. That just shows what Matt Grimes can do. I think sometimes he is criminally underrated by Swansea fans and what he offers us. We would definitely miss him if he gets poached. I think they would know about it. But Duff specifically was speaking after the Northampton game where we saw a lot more of these style of ball, and Cullen did start that game. That he wants to mix up the way the Swansea play and not just be all on the floor like what we are kind of known for, because then teams come with that high press and we can't deal with it. So he wants to then mix it up. So actually, no, Grimes is going to ping it over the top, and then you're going to have to turn and defend that. So maybe it puts you off pressing us so high. So that's what Duff is aiming for. I think Yates can probably do a similar job to Cullen, but Cullen seems to be the one that's doing it the best in terms of turning on the defender on the line and making that run and getting to the ball in an opportunity. So when Cullen did come on, he did change the formation to 4-3-3, and Cullen played as a left winger, essentially supporting. I think Yates went through the middle and Perot went to the right. But yeah, so it just shows that there's a little bit more flexibility and tactical game management maybe than what we've seen from Swansea in the last 2 seasons, I would say, already in just 2 games. But yeah, it would be interesting to see how they utilise that. And obviously, we know all about Kyle Barley as well. So, yeah. Awesome. So, finally, then, thank you very much for joining me. I got one more question to ask you, which is a little bit less football related. But if you're going on especially an away day, I'm sure you have a couple of them. So, when you do go to a stadium, and it doesn't have to be your stadium, and it doesn't actually have to be a drink that you've had, but what would be your ideal pint to go and have at a stadium when you're enjoying football?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's always a tricky one.
Yeah, I think it'd have to be a pint of Carling, unfortunately. Yeah, I think a lot of people will slate me for that one.
Well, sometimes just, simple is just best, isn't it? Not calling Carling simple, but I feel like it's a classic, isn't it?
A nice pint of Madry as well. Wouldn't go amiss. Yeah, Madry or Carling.
I'm more of a cider drinker, I am, so I'm usually struggling in some stadiums to actually get something. But sometimes it's all right, but then there's always like you get into about one bar in New Way End that just serves beer, which is fine. But I have to kind of broaden my horizons.
Always like warm Heineken as well in the away ends.
Yeah, always warm. Well, there's a thing now at our stadium where they've changed the cups to paper cups this year, or like cardboard cups or whatever. So there's a bit of outroar about that down here. So in the podcast we've done this week, my co-host Lee was proper on a rant about it, saying it ruins your pint and all this. So I went down for the game on Tuesday, and I had a cider in it, and to be honest, it was completely fine. So apparently it's really bad for a beer, but not so bad for cider. But I don't know what your view is on paper cups. Have you got an opinion there?
No, to be honest, I've got an opinion on paper straws.
Yeah, I think I'll probably share the same opinion with you on that, especially in Costa, because their lids are so tight with the like spikes that you put the straw through that you can't move the straw, and then it just nothing comes. I hate it. Anyway, bit off topic, but thank you very much for joining me today, Brad.
Thank you.
I'll obviously tag you when the video goes live later on, but if you want to just remind everyone where they can find you on Twitter and what sort of stuff you do.
Yep, so my handle's at Albion Insights. It's mostly about West Brom content, but it's a lot of EFL and Premier League stuff as well, general football. I post a lot of threads, analytical threads, a lot of stats and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. But yeah, again, thank you. Very, very informative. And again, I'll retweet that thread you did on this game, because there's a lot of good information that kind of, you can say, stuff we were talking about here, but in a lot more detail from Brad then, and whoever you've contacted as well to give an insight. So very good read. Check that out, and we shall catch you in the next video, and good luck for the game. Not too much, of course, and the rest of your season after that. Hopefully we get another 3-2 win, because that seemed to be the theme of last year, didn't it? So, goals galore. Yeah,
thank
catch
you
you in the next one.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
That's all right. Cheers.